felt it too. It was a quick jolt there in Malibu. I know that you have a view from your home. Are people out on the streets? Does it seem like everyone noticed it, or is it pretty much everyone back to normal at this hour from what you're seeing?
Yeah, I don't see anything unusual. People are still going by on Pacific Coast Highway. It was just a matter of a few seconds, but it was something that, immediately said, this is an earthquake. It shook the house for a few seconds. I did not feel the aftershock, as you guys reported. There was at least one aftershock. I haven't felt that, but this one really was a jolt, something we haven't felt here in years.
Yeah, it's interesting. There apparently the center of at least two aftershocks is in the water right off the coast from where you are. We're seeing on Twitter someone in Thousand Oaks saying that they felt it, and wow, that they really felt the quake, that it was a jolt, and that was my experience, frankly. I'm surprised it was a 4.6. I thought it was larger.
Well, and that was making me wonder how deep this earthquake actually was, because a lot of times when they're really deep, you don't feel them as strongly. So I was thinking this was either very close or very shallow.
We're seeing that perhaps the depth was 5.6 miles, but that's not confirmed, and it's not coming from the USGS. But yeah, thankfully, only a few aftershocks. Pat Harvey lives, of course, nearby there as well. And Pat, I understand that you felt it when it happened a few minutes ago.
Hi, Ross. Yes, it's my off day today, believe it or not. And I was actually doing some errands in West Hills. I was in the West Hills area. I had pulled into a driveway, and I was about to get out of the car, and all of a sudden, I saw and felt my car rocking back and forth. So I'm thinking, well, this has never happened before.
Right.
I wonder, let me turn off the car and see if it stops, and it didn't. So naturally, I went to, I finally got my alert that we were having an earthquake, and of course I went on to some social media sites and indeed found out that's exactly what it was. But it was very surprising to me because that had never happened before. And I don't know if I've been in an earthquake on the road and it happened and I didn't feel it, but I was in park, hadn't turned the car off yet, and there it was. And it was interesting. There were people on the street coming out of their homes to, I guess, inquire with their neighbors what had happened. And I must say, I did not identify myself, Ross.
Well, Pat, I think it's interesting that you said you were enjoying a day off. There is no such thing for a journalist. We've got you working today. And, you were saying we've been hearing that it's been more like a jolt and didn't have that rolling feel that we often do associate with earthquakes in our area.
Well, I tell you what, Amy, where I was, again, I didn't know what it was, but my car was moving back and forth. Didn't last long, so I didn't feel a jolt. I just felt and saw my car sort of going back and forth as it was in park, and I couldn't figure it out. I said, "Well, okay, there couldn't be something underneath this concrete, making my car move like that." But I did hear from other friends who were really scared and said they felt a hard jolt. I did not, but again, I witnessed my car moving back and forth.
I've been in a car, Pat, when we've been through a quake, and I didn't feel a thing. So I think it says something that you definitely felt it in your car, which I know has some shocks on it.
Well, and that's the thing, Ross. I have never felt something like that. That's why I didn't know what it was. To be parked and have your car, a heavy machine move back and forth like that. That was surprising to me. And I mean, I was here for the Northridge quake. I've been in some very large magnitude earthquakes, but this was the first time in a vehicle, but I certainly felt it and I saw it.
Well, this is the first time I've been here at the broadcast center and thought I need to go outside. That's how strong it was to me.
I agree with Ross, Pat. I was standing in the hallway and wondering, okay, is this the time when we need to, find a doorway, a table, and it stopped before I started to make that move.
Good.
What's happening now where you are, Pat? You mentioned that a few people were coming outside. Is everyone pretty much back inside? And
Oh, yeah. They were laughing once they all figured it out. Yes, we did have an earthquake, but I didn't see, I couldn't, I could say that there was no damage because even the building I went into, there was nothing wrong. Nothing had fallen, and as far as I can tell with the neighbors coming outside, they just were curious as I guess if everyone else felt the same thing, and they started laughing and then went back in their homes. So I certainly didn't see any damage, on the outside, which certainly have seen before. So, I don't know. I mean, I haven't gone home yet, so hopefully everything is okay.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, we have SkyCal over Malibu right now, and everything looking as beautiful and normal as can be. Meanwhile, here on Twitter, another person saying that was the biggest quake I've felt since I moved out here 7 years ago. And what's crazy is the quake wasn't even near me. Having the apartment on the second floor shake around as if you're a small creature in a box is very scary, and we know what that's like.
Yeah, very descriptive.
That was very, I was going to say very descriptive. Well, remember our hurricane?
Yes,
Yeah.
and Ojai.
Yes.
Not that long ago, and I remember being on the air too and feeling that one. But I guess sort of being used to it, guys. I didn't panic because I knew that's what it was. But again, for me, this was the first time to, have my car move like that. That was pretty wild, I must say. So what a start to my off day.
Well, listen, on the other side here, someone else tweeted out, everyone in LA really claiming that was a huge quake. Y'all are so dramatic. Listen, these are the good things that we are laughing and talking about no damage after.
Which is the best part. That is
absolutely.
the best
You
part.
guys haven't heard about anything, right? I mean, I don't see any emergency vehicles where I am. Anything like that.
We have not
reports.
heard of any damage and no injuries reported at this point. And again, we are looking over Malibu right now from SkyCal high above. And as Ross was mentioning, it's just a beautiful afternoon out there, a little sunshine. And finally, we have gotten rid of that rain. But certainly.
Yeah, well, you know what? I did think about this, guys, when I found out what it was. For our, folks that have did suffer losses with mudslides with their homes because of all the rain. I'm just hoping that with the earth moving like it has, that there is no further damage to infrastructure and to people who have lost, their foundations because of all the rain and because of all the slides. But I imagine if you haven't heard about it by now, then maybe all is well. Certainly hope so.
Yes, definitely. That's what we are certainly hoping for. And Pat, we certainly appreciate you joining us on your quote unquote off day. Always
anytime.
in tune with the news, Pat. So thank you so much. We appreciate you spending a little time with us.
And Pat, on what you were saying, today's the 53rd anniversary of the 1971 San Fernando earthquake, which was recorded as a magnitude 6.6. It's also known as the Silmar earthquake, and it killed 64 people and caused more than $500 million in damages. That was 1971, 53 years ago today.
Thank you again, Pat. We certainly appreciate it. We are going to
Amy and Ross.
have a good one.
Have a good break.
Let's
We'll
check
talk to you
in
soon.
with Marina Jurica right now. She's standing by with some new information for us. Marina.
That's right. You can definitely see all of those aftershocks that are popping. Initial epicenter is that larger red dot, and that was that magnitude 4.6 that we all felt at about 1:47 p.m. Depth 9 miles, so pretty deep, but definitely still shallow enough to continue to produce these aftershocks. And all the little red dots you can see all around there are the reported aftershocks after that initial one at 1:47, which is very common, especially across the San Andreas Fault. When you see that slipping, it takes a little bit once you see that movement happen for that fault to settle again. And so because the fault needs to settle, as it settles, it creates these aftershocks, and that is what we are seeing right now. And so happened, like we said, about 25 minutes ago. And giving you a little bit of a broader perspective, we are a little bit, me see. There we go. Broader perspective, you can see where it is, and it's just about 6 miles north of Malibu, and so pretty down far south of. And it was measured at 4.6 as we continue to see those aftershocks pop up here and there. So the earthquake was near Malibu, and today's quake happened along the San Andreas Fault, which is where we get the majority of our movement, and California averages about 17 quakes in an average year. And of course, with any quake, there's that 5% chance for a stronger one, the foreshock. But more than likely, we are always seeing a multiple of these aftershocks that come with it as that fault settles. It takes a little bit of time once the earth cracks, once that fault moves. So because of that movement, it has to settle back into its next placement area, and that's why we feel that earth settling, and that is what is an aftershock, basically. And so as we continue to monitor this, we will be looking at probably a few more of those popping up as we head into the rest of the day. But I'm glad to see, though, like she said, we did see a lot of rainfall, Pat mentioned, you know, with the mudslides. And so any movement in the earth is going to create some issues with that. And so because of that, we are going to see problematic areas that are already loosened from landslides, rock slides, mudslides that could be problematic. People are going to want to make sure if they are in those areas that did see a lot of issues because of the recent rainfall, they're going to want to make sure that everything's okay in their region, just because we are susceptible, because we have seen so much rain that the ground is super saturated. So any movement at all can create some initial issues as a result. But it looks from our helicopter, Ross and Amy, that things are looking pretty good out there, which is great, because if it was any stronger, we might have seen, especially those areas that got hit hardest, the Santa Monica Mountains, as well as Hollywood Hills, have much more problematic issues.
You know, Marina, earlier today, not too long ago, around noon, there was a 5.7 quake in Hawaii. I know that's a great distance from us, but any relation at all?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Earlier today, around noon, there was a 5.7 quake, I believe, in Hawaii.
Oh, in the Ring of Fire?
Yeah, so, I mean, any relation at all? Of course, it's a distance away, a different fault, but what are your thoughts on that? Coincidence? There's some dramatic video out of Hawaii of the shaking there from the 5.7.
So the Ring of Fire is pretty much connected. Yes, they are all different faults, but they connect. If you ever Google an image of it, it's connecting all the way from the California coastline up through Alaska, all the way through Russia, with kind of Hawaii smack in the middle. And so the Ring of Fire is just a very, very active, not only volcanic location, but earthquake location that creates those volcanoes. And so because of that, yes, they do play off of each other at times, but I would have to say that it would be a stronger earthquake than that to be able to play on other fault lines. It's kind of like chess. If you think about chess movement, you know, one bigger earthquake, you know, another fault could feel, and then as a result make accommodations and move around because that part of the puzzle piece is moving. And so it could be, but guaranteed, definitely not. But you said 5.7. That's you know, I mean, that's a pretty good sized earthquake. But ground movement, all like chess, plays together. And so once an area starts to move, then another area could follow along, just because it even felt the slightest quiver from that.
Well, so far it appears we've been very lucky. This 4.6 quake happening, a few aftershocks, no reports of damages, at least not so far. No video yet that we've seen of anyone capturing this, but as the day rolls on here, certainly we'll see something, right, Amy?
Yes,
something
yes. Someone will send in a little home video that shows items shaking. Again, this happening at 1:47 this afternoon. It was a 4.6 earthquake hitting in the Malibu area. People in Orange County, even to downtown LA, say that they felt this earthquake. It was followed by a 3.0 aftershock. And it's all happening on the 53rd anniversary of the Sylmar quake, which, of course, was very destructive, causing a lot of damage around the area.
And, you know, it's good to point out that LAFD right now is in earthquake mode. When the ground shakes in our area, in the city of Los Angeles, LAFD goes into that mode. Firefighters from all of our 106 stations provide a complete survey now of the 470 square miles of greater Los Angeles to make sure we're all safe. So far, though, no damage reported from LAFD.
Yes, and our Mark Liu, who typically is sitting in here with us at the breaking news desk, is still working hard on a breaking story, but from his
home.
car, I believe. Mark?
Yeah, no, I'm actually home, Amy and Ross. Yeah, I got home and I was actually just putting my bag down here at my home in the Northridge area when I was in my bedroom and everything started to shake, and I said, oh, that is definitely an earthquake. So in true assignment editor style, I ran right to my office and jumped on my computer and got on the U.S. Geological Survey website. And, you know, one of the things that I'm sure that we noted is that it started as a 4.7, went down to a 4.5 magnitude, and now is listed as a 4.6. That's because in Southern California, these earthquakes are measured automatically by automatic sensors all throughout the region. And it is only after they are reviewed by a seismologist that it comes in with a final magnitude. So the computer, when it first detected this earthquake, caught it as a 4.7, then maybe downgraded it to a 4.5. But now that I see it's been stable as a 4.6, it's probably been reviewed by seismologists at Caltech and the U.S. Geological Survey. Mm-hmm. The other thing that was really interesting to me as I went on the USGS website was they have a service there where you can self-report if you felt it. And it's that screen where there are a lot of small blue squares across Southern California. I am seeing people as far north as Bakersfield who self-reported feeling this earthquake. Now, the shaking was very slight in Bakersfield. That is pretty far north for an earthquake that happened in the Malibu area. And there was also people self-reporting almost to the border of Tijuana and San Diego that said that they felt it as well. So this was felt widespread across the Southern California region, certainly here in the Valley. I felt it, and the first thing I did is went around my home and checked. There's no damage here. And, of course, you had just said that the LAFD and probably LA County fire departments, all fire departments in all 5 counties, are in earthquake mode where they check to make sure there's no damage in their counties. But so far we haven't heard any yet.
You know, we have just heard that the official depth coming from the USGS is 13.9 kilometers. That's about 8.6 miles, so a little deeper than we were getting those initial reports of.
Which makes it even more surprising that people felt it so strongly when it was not one of those shallow earthquakes that struck again at 1:47 this afternoon. And again, as Mark was saying, it's really been felt far and wide, you know, from downtown LA to Orange County to Mark just mentioning Bakersfield.
I mean, Mark, how intense was it where you are? And why don't you tell us again exactly where you live? You don't have to give us the street address.
No, of course. No, I'm in the Northridge. I'm here in Northridge. So, this is just certainly anyone who lives in the San Fernando Valley is used to having earthquakes. I was just putting my bag down, stepping in from in the front door of my home, and I walked into my bedroom and I heard the windows start to rattle, and I looked at my bed and I saw the pillows were shaking, and I said, oh, this is definitely an earthquake. And one thing that we do, Ross, maybe I'm sure that you do, whenever we feel an earthquake in the studio, I always look up. Because the studio lights swing in our studio if there's an earthquake. Sometimes the floor will move, but it's because someone's walking behind me or there's a chair that's being moved. So that kind of rumbles. But I always check the ceiling in the studio if there's an earthquake. And I did that reactively in my own bedroom. And I looked up and I saw the fan on my bedroom ceiling was swinging. And I thought, okay, that's definitely an earthquake. I guess it's a TV journalist thing to look at the lights in your own studio to see if that was really an earthquake. But it was enough to make my ceiling fan move a little bit. But nothing came off counters or anything like that. And I didn't really hear anything like clinking or like any glasses in the kitchen clinking or anything like that. And also, I guess it's the Southern California earthquake thing to check and see if any car alarms went off. And no car alarms in my neighborhood went off, and that's usually a magnitude 5 or above. Maybe that's just sort of an urban legend in Southern California. But that was another indicator that I thought maybe this would be somewhere in the 4s. And it does appear that it's going to land at about 4.5 or 4.6 on the magnitude scale.
You don't have to tell you, Mark. We were surprised when the number came in. I don't know if you were already plugged in when Pat was on the phone. She felt it in her car, inside her car. It was quite a jolt here, and there were fixtures swinging in the studios. But that felt about right to you.
Yeah, it did. I've lived through other earthquakes here in Southern California, 5.5s, I think maybe I'm thinking when I was in high school, I may have felt a 6.0 earthquake. But this one, usually, I didn't feel the need to immediately run into a doorway, which would be if I felt like perhaps I wouldn't be able to stand. This one was a gentle roll, and it was definitely enough for me to notice that things were shaking, but I didn't ever feel like this was going to be something where there might be damage. However, there is that fear always, is this going to get stronger as it goes on? So it was only a couple of seconds, and I was relieved when it stopped shaking. I'm sure everyone was.
Yes, that is very true, because once it starts, you just wonder, is this the beginning or is this the end of that? And Mark, I have to tell you, I was in the hallway and began to wonder, do I need to go seek cover, under a table or something nearby, because I just wasn't so sure. And, as Ross was mentioning, we were thinking that it might have been really big or really close. And now we're hearing that 4.6 and in Malibu. So certainly a lot of folks feeling this one. And so far we have had no reports of any damage or injuries, which is really the best news of all.
Right, and look at the map right now, the aftershocks in the water. Marina, I don't know if you're still plugged in, but can we talk about this? Or would we be seeing any movement for anyone at the beach? Certainly we can't see anything obvious from SkyCal right now as we fly over the area.
Yeah, we have not heard anything about the potential of tsunamis. It's not out of the question, obviously, but it would not be coming into the California coastline. It would be moving north, or it would be moving out to the east.
Let me interrupt you really quickly. We're going to go to this press conference at Caltech right now. Let's listen in.
It's located between Malibu and Thousand Oaks, very close to what's called the Malibu Coast Fault. It's at a significant depth. It's about, 13 kilometers? About 13 kilometers deep. It's widely felt across the Los Angeles area. I felt it here in Pasadena. And it's, again, a fault that's, it's an area that has had plenty of earthquakes in the past and is well understood to be a seismically active area. It's not so large that we would really be expecting any damage. So it's sort of run-of-the-mill for earthquake country. We have had about a dozen aftershocks already, and that would be expected to continue over the day at least. That's pretty much what we have on it. Should we get some questions coming in if you want to have more details?
Sure. So everyone, as I said before, if you have questions to submit, please use the Q&A bubble at the bottom bar of your Zoom. We have one in right now from the Associated Press. Is there any possible connection between this and the 6.3 magnitude quake that hit Hawaii a few hours ago?
Let me answer that. It's only a little over an hour since the earthquake in Hawaii, which is actually a magnitude 5.7. Is the magnitude that's coming out. And no, there would be no relation. I mean, earthquakes, magnitude 5s happen every day somewhere around the world. And we have looked for correlations between earthquakes at greater distances. It scale, and we do see it, but it scales with the size of the first earthquake. And a magnitude 5.7 might affect as much as 100 miles or so. And California is way more than 100 miles away from Hawaii. So no, we don't see it as any relationship. Just remind you that if you have a random distribution, sometimes it clusters, or otherwise it wouldn't be random.
Thank you. We've got a question now from KCAL. What fault was this near?
Gabriel, you want to pick it up?
Sure. This one was very near the Malibu Coast Fault Zone. So I think we mentioned earlier, this is an area that's had, similar size earthquakes before. So a known active region.
Mm-hmm. And the Malibu Coast Fault comes out just about at the coastline. Some probably is controlling some of the coastline along there in Malibu, pushing up those mountains, dips down underneath the mountains, and this is located down dip, so close to the lower part of the fault. As I said, it's at 13 kilometers depth.
Thank you. Got another question. When was the last quake near this area felt?
there was a magnitude 5 within the last few years. We need to do a quick search of it. Just off the top of my head, I know there was a 5.2 just south of here in 1979, actually during the Rose Bowl game in 1979. There's another in 1989, there was a magnitude 5.1. Again, similar sort of area. Are there more recent ones, Gabriel?
Yeah, so what we have on our records is that there's been about 5 events of a magnitude 4 or greater within 10 kilometers of today's event. There was a 5.3 was the largest in 1973. And I think the most recent one, it looks like, was a 4.4 in 2009. So that's within 10 kilometers. There was one that was, a little ways off the coast, I think last January.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Just to add to that, everybody will remember there was the Ojai earthquake that happened not too long ago. I think that was the one Lucy was referring to. That was a magnitude 5.1 also.
But farther north,
Yeah,
not on the Malibu, right?
But
Yeah, but
similar.
in those transverse ranges, those mountains that go, they call them transverse because they run east-west, where most things in California run northwest-southeast. And the transverse ranges have dozens of faults within them. They've had many, many earthquakes, and probably the highest seismic risk outside of the San Andreas Fault, just because there's so many faults within this area.
Yeah, thank you. Are there other questions from the press? Like I said, just go down to the Q&A function and type in any questions you have. Okay, seeing none. Lucy, Alan, Gabriel, are there any additional thoughts you have on this that you'd like to share?
I'll just go ahead and say we contribute to earthquake early warning. The USGS actually is our counterpart that it puts out the alert to the different systems that then go to your cell phones and whatnot. It works successfully. We heard it in our hallway go off about 10 seconds before we felt the waves here in Pasadena. So just if there's questions about that, then just FYI that seems to be working.
I'd also add the one other thing that's true of every earthquake in California has about a 5% chance of being followed by something bigger within the next couple of days. And so there is the possibility, very low, that we could have a bigger event here, but it's higher than your background case. And it just reminds you that if we were to have a big earthquake, that you should drop, cover, hold on when it's actually shaking. And you might want to think about what you've done of storing water, for instance, or other ways of looking at your earthquake supplies. We like to think of these events as a good opportunity to just remind you that the bigger ones do happen very occasionally.
All right, you've been listening to a briefing from the Earthquake
Fantastic, thank
Center
you.
at Caltech. This is about
If
the
there are no other questions, I
4.6
think
quake
we can bring this to a close for now.
that we
can always
had
circle
earlier
back here if
today.
there are new
They just
developments
told us that there has
or
been a
additional
dozen
questions.
aftershocks. This quake happening centered along the
Hearing none
Malibu
at the
fault line
present,
at a depth
I'll,
of about
go ahead and
8.6
start.
miles.
Oh.
They did mention that this area is prone to smaller quakes like this. They said in that 10-mile area, the largest was a 5.3 back in 1973. And you can tell looking at the map.
Yeah,
There, Amy,
absolutely.
look at all the aftershocks we've had in the area.
Yes, quite a few of them. This is near the Malibu Coast Fault. And also they mentioned that this was in no way connected to that earthquake that hit around noon in Hawaii. But this one, again, a 4.6 earthquake striking between Malibu and Thousand Oaks. It was 13 kilometers deep, which was certainly surprising to you and I, Ross. We thought it was going to be a little more shallow because we felt it so strongly, and we've been hearing reports from people who have said that they felt it in Orange County, downtown LA, even as far as Bakersfield. So this is certainly one of those jolts that many people felt. And we also heard Dr. Jones say that sometimes this is the precursor of a larger quake that we need to be prepared for the next 5 days. But really, we always need to be prepared for an earthquake and make sure that we have the necessary supplies, plenty of water. And, you need to be prepared to pretty much be on your own for at least 3 days because it can take that long for your services to get to you and your home. So be ready, be prepared, and this just serves as a great reminder. No damage reported, no injuries reported so far, and we hope that that, of course, continues.
Exactly, and she said that the likelihood of a larger quake is only around 5%, thankfully, but we do know that the aftershocks, which are much smaller, are being felt across the area, much smaller. I think we're talking 3.0 and below.
The largest, yes.
What we've been seeing so far. Again, LAFD is on alert right now and checking out from every area around its 106 stations across our area. No reports of damage anywhere, no injuries, and this is something that we wouldn't expect from a 4.6. But as we've been showing you and telling you, the reports coming in across Twitter, this one seemed unusually sharp. We felt it sharply here at the studio. Our anchor, Pat Harvey, felt it while in her car, which is very unusual because I've been through quakes in a car before, and those shocks usually take care of it unless it's huge. Our assignment manager, Mark Liu, home in Northridge, said that his fan on the ceiling was shaking. He felt it walking into his home. We spoke with David Goldstein, who lives in Malibu, and he said it was unusual that he felt it in the home he's lived in for some 20 years, not usually feeling the shocks or aftershocks there. We do know it was felt very far away. Most of the reports that I've seen on social media are coming from Thousand Oaks for some reason. That's about 6-7 miles away from the epicenter.
Although they were saying that, yeah, it was between Malibu and Thousand Oaks, and it really is close to one another. And so this is, you know, certainly people have felt earthquakes in the area in the past, but this one, again, as you were mentioning, Ross, felt a lot stronger. Again, 4.6 hitting at 1:47 this afternoon. And again, there have been no reports of any damage and no injuries. But we do know that there were early alerts that came out. People received them on their phones. I received some information on my phone, but it was after the fact that it did in fact hit. But those early warning systems, there had been a lot of discussion about those. But they really do help, especially if you are in a position where you can get to safety. A train can be stopped, you know, if you're in a larger earthquake. So again, the best news here is that there have been no reports of any damage and no reports of any injuries.
Well, this pretty much sums it up on social media. Someone is showing a table with plastic chairs saying, here's the damage, and it's one chair fallen down. Listen, if that's the worst we see from this, we're doing really good. But as we were hearing from Caltech, it doesn't mean that there could be, they could not be possible infrastructure problems. And even a small quake can damage water lines, which is your immediate concern. Let's go back to Mark Liu right now. Mark, have you felt any of the aftershocks there in Northridge?
No, actually not at all. I had just stood up after that news conference had started. I went into my kitchen and my in-laws are home as well. My mother and father-in-law live here with us, and I asked them, have you felt anything in the living room? They're watching KCAL right now. And they said, no, I haven't felt any of the aftershocks at all, just the original 4.6 that happened a little while ago. You know, felt that very clearly, very significantly here at my home in Northridge, but haven't felt any of the other aftershocks. And I've been monitoring the U.S. Geological Survey website from my office here and looking at, as you were talking about, multiple aftershocks have come in. But no, I mean, they've all been smaller than the original. So there really hasn't been an example that I can say of where I've actually felt them here. It also looks like I've been monitoring Twitter and looking at all of the various fire agencies throughout Southern California. I have not yet seen any evidence on social media of people reporting any damage anywhere as well, but I'm continuing to search. You know, fire departments automatically go into that mode where they send out their fire units to check and see if there are if there's any damage anywhere. And I don't know right now if there is anyone who has felt it. I've also been looking at the U.S. Geological website Have You Felt It map, which is something where you, as any civilian in Southern California, can self-report to the U.S. Geological Survey if you felt it. Out east, it looks like we have people reporting in Banning that they felt it, very minor shaking in Banning. So you're almost in Palm Desert at this point, all the way out to the east. And the furthest out west, I'm looking at people self-reporting in the Goleta area, Isla Vista. So very widely felt all the way from Bakersfield to Tijuana, Banning to Santa Barbara. This earthquake was just felt by millions of people this afternoon.
Yeah, we did get the reports from Palm Springs as well, Mark. I don't know if you were with us earlier, but it bears repeating that today is the 53rd anniversary of the 1971 San Fernando quake, which was a 6.6. Many people know as a Silmar quake. That one killing 64 people, causing more than $500 million in damages. And today's quake causing 0 damages. Right now, SkyCal is flying, I believe, over Mulholland. Some of the areas that have seen extreme saturation, and we've been watching these areas for slides and that sort of thing.
Parts of the roadway have been closed since those mudslides, causing damage there on the roadways, and it's unclear at this point how long this stretch of roadway will be closed, but certainly folks are out there surveying, checking to see if this 4.6 earthquake has caused any further damage to the roadways and really any damage at all around the area. But at this point, we have not received word of any damage or injuries at this point.
Let's go back to Marina Jurica, if we could. Marina, what's the latest from the Next Weather Center? What are you seeing?
Well, Ross, we are seeing more and more of those red dots pop up, that's for sure. And those are all of those aftershocks. And like I said, that is the ground settling, and it takes time for the ground to settle. It's very natural for us to see many of these aftershocks pop up, and none of them, as I have been checking on the Next Weather earthquake graphic you can see there on your screen, have been greater than that 4.6 that we saw at 1:47 p.m. So we're coming up at almost an hour now, and we'll continue to monitor this. But as the USGS said, couple of hours for possibly the rest of the day, we will be looking at these aftershocks, and the ground needs to settle. When the fault breaks, then it settles into its new position, and as it settles into that new position, we see little aftershocks occurring all over the place as the ground settles back into where it is going to land at that point. And giving you a little perspective here, so 6 miles north of Malibu, you can see this as well, south of the 101. And she also mentioned that there is that 5% chance that a larger quake will happen, but it is a small chance. More than likely, it is going to continue to be these quakes that will continue throughout the rest of the day today. But 4.6 earthquake near Malibu at 1:47. And today's quake happened along the Malibu coast fault. And she was saying that those are those east-west running faults. They average about 17 quakes a year. And then there's that 5% chance that we are going to see a foreshock. But these aftershocks will continue, at least I would say, for the rest of the day today. So folks need to be prepared for that, but none of them have come any close, actually. 2.7 was the largest that I saw as I was looking around on the map. So 4.6 was the largest at almost an hour ago now. And like she said, it's a very active region. It happens a lot, and folks around here just need to be prepared for that. But yes, with the recent just copious amounts of rainfall that we saw, I would just definitely want to make sure that those folks who did see the mudslides, the landslides, the rock slide issues because of the atmospheric river event that we just had, to just be very cognizant of the fact that any earth movement at all could create more problems in those already problematic areas. So just make sure that you just take heed, keep warning, and watch in those areas that have been affected from that. But it's good to see that the chopper out there has not picked up on any damage from this. Luckily, you know, we've learned our lesson, and a lot of the infrastructure is able to withstand, especially a 4.6 earthquake, and all of the buildings have been made to withstand that code.
You know, Marina, how fortunate are we that the rain, the worst of it, was over a few days ago, and we've had a little sunshine to help dry this area out, because this really could be a danger along Mulholland or in this area where these slides have happened, to have the shake with the hypersaturated ground. At least we got a little bit of a break. Do you think that if we would have seen something, perhaps we would have seen it by now? Maybe the danger from that first 4.6 is over. What do you think?
For sure, yeah. Yes, and we should also mention, though, that you saw SkyCal flying over that stretch of roadway, and we want to make it very clear that that damage was not caused by the earthquake,
Right.
that was, in fact, from the mud that flowed down those hillsides from all of that rain. And so there is damage to the roadway, but that has not been caused by the earthquake that was earlier this week. And so, of course, folks will be going around and checking to see if there is any damage, but so far none reported. And just want to make sure that people do know that that was not caused by the earthquake.
Yeah, unfortunately not exacerbated, right, by today's quake. And Marina, I know we talk about this a lot, but it always bears repeating that this is what we want along our fault lines. We want these smaller quakes to relieve some pressure so we avoid the larger ones. 17 along the Malibu fault line every single year. That's a good thing that we haven't had a big one, right?
Exactly, it is. And as it does adjust, because the land is constantly in flux and in movement, so as it adjusts, then we'll see the smaller adjustments, like you said, relieve that pressure. It's like a pressure cooker. And so you want to make sure that these smaller amounts hopefully will happen because, yes, I mean, obviously, if we have a larger earthquake, it relieves more pressure, but we'll continue to see, of course, these minor changes just continually. And a lot of the earthquakes, you know, if you follow any of the USGS sites or follow them, you know, we usually have earthquakes very, very often. They're just so small that we don't feel them. And that is these fault lines adjusting to the constant movement of the earth. And we just happen to live in a very active place where we see a lot more movement than other people. And so, like Amy mentioned, these scenes that we're seeing right now, of course, had everything to do with the atmospheric river and the massive amounts of rainfall that we just saw. We saw very small amounts with this secondary system that came through, 1/4 to 1/2 inch of rainfall. Thank goodness that moved through Wednesday night into Thursday. And we've been relatively dry both yesterday and today, which we desperately needed for that super saturation to get some relief. And as we continue to move into the weekend, thank goodness, we've got a nice long stretch of dry weather. The next rain event looks to hold off until actually the end of next week into our President's Day weekend. I'm just looking at these people having absolutely no idea what they're doing. And I'm hoping they're being safe because I'm like, what are you doing there? That is definitely not someplace that you want to be riding your bicycle in for sure. But
yeah, and this is Studio City that we're over here. And this is mudslide from the rains, of course. We want to keep repeating that so people don't think this damages today. I think they're just trying to get past it.
Exactly, trying
It's
to
coincidental.
get past it, yes. And, you know, they're probably trying to enjoy the fact that the stretch of Mulholland is closed and they don't have to worry about cars, but now they've got to worry about lots of mud on the roadway, which is also not good. Again, if you are just joining us and perhaps you didn't feel it, a 4.6 magnitude earthquake struck at 1:47 this afternoon, centered between Malibu and Thousand Oaks. It was 13 kilometers deep. It was felt from as far as Orange County to downtown LA. Some folks even in Bakersfield saying that they have felt it. It was near the Malibu coast fault line, and we do want to reiterate that this had no connection with the earthquake that struck in Hawaii around noon today. We have had no reports of any damage or injuries from this earthquake, although large jolt felt by many folks, including us here in Studio City at our studio. Our own Pat Harvey feeling it while she was out running errands in the North Hills area, feeling her car sway. Our Mark Liu was at home in Northridge, said he had just got home and certainly felt things shaking around there. And
we felt it here.
Yes, definitely felt it here.
We both came running into the studio thinking it was a much larger. Initially reported, I think it's a 4.7, then down to a 4.5. Now we're at more official 4.6. Since this happened, just before 2 o'clock, we've had more than a dozen aftershocks, all of them below 3.0, we believe. We know this is at a depth of 8.6, nearly 9 miles. And we know that, you know, we have, about 17 quakes a year along the Malibu fault line, most of them really small. The largest in that area is all the way back in 1973, was a 5.3. And you remember that Ojai quake we had just a few weeks ago during the storm we had, right?
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
a 5.1 by comparison. And that one was certainly strong enough to knock bottles off store shelves there and cause some damage. But here, we've seen no damage. The most notable thing about this quake is how sharp it was, how quick it was, and how far it was felt all the way out to Palm Springs, very far north, very far south. But as SkyCal flies over our area, we are seeing, thankfully, nothing but remnants from the storm. And we've also been talking about how thankful we are that we had just a few hours at least to dry out that saturated ground. Look, every hour makes a difference when the water has a chance to sink deeper and deeper, because we know how loose the soil can be in many parts of the Southland.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as you were mentioning, Ross, I have to say, when you first started to say that we were glad, I thought, what is he talking about? And then I realized that you were going on to say that this does release some of that pressure. But, you know, so many of us have felt earthquakes in our area. And it is always interesting to hear how people describe them, Ross. Some people saying a jolt, sometimes it's a rolling. But it seems like most people are describing this one as a jolt and then some shaking. And, you know, sometimes you even hear it. And I felt like I could hear this one. I don't know if it was because things were shaking. Initially, I was thinking it was a large truck going by. And then I realized there's too much shaking going on, and began to wonder if I needed to find a safe path to, you know, either get under a table, get to a doorway. I know that the doorway is something that they no longer recommend. They say a sturdy table. But, you know, as I was looking around the hallway, I thought, wow, where am I going to go? And thought about that and thought about where the nearest table was. But it stopped before I could actually make that movement, which was certainly a good thing.
Listen, it is always a good reminder when we have an ending with no damage that we need to be prepared. The water is something that we always need to think about, because if you're like me, unfortunately, you have the water set aside, then maybe you dip into it, maybe it's time to refill it. That's the best outcome of this warning and briefly concerning moment. Right? To be prepared, because these things happen in the Southland, and fortunately today, no reports of damage.
But we do know that, you know, if and when the next one comes, you could experience damage near your home. And we've often heard that you really need to be able to survive at your home for at least 3 days before services may get to you, because crews will be so busy, and it's impossible to say if they could even get to you. So experts often say you need enough water for your entire family for 3 days. Of course, you want food as well. But, you know, as you were talking, Ross, you know, having that water, bottles of water stored, and really having an earthquake kit. They often say that we could lose power. You want to make sure that you have some cash in your home, because, you know, the ATMs may not be working. You might not be able to use those cards. So you want to make sure you have cash, you have plenty of water and food for your family. And certainly this is a day that is a great reminder, as we have experienced this earthquake. There was also a 5.7 earthquake in Hawaii, and fortunately here, no damage, and no reports of any tsunamis in the Hawaii area as well, and nothing here for that earthquake that struck near Malibu on the Malibu coast fault line. But again, no connection between the earthquake in Hawaii or the one that happened here. And we've been talking about the aftershocks, and the largest one being a 3.0. But we have not heard anyone say that they felt that aftershock at this point, but so many people feeling that 4.6.
You know, it's interesting. We've been looking on social media for all the reactions, and one person was saying this is the worst that they felt in 7 years. It's certainly the biggest shake that I've felt in quite some time. It was interesting to hear from Pat Harvey inside a car just stopping, and she felt it despite the shocks, even though it was just a 4.6. But we did see, and Pat was describing, some people come out of their homes wondering what was going on. And fortunately, that's been the extent of it. So now we're just seeing these aftershocks come in smaller and smaller, it looks like, from the map that we're looking at right here. If you're just joining us, this quake happened around 1:47 this afternoon. It was a 4.6 centered near Malibu. It's the Malibu fault line that was affected. It was a depth of nearly 9 miles and dozens of aftershocks. This is an area, as we all know, is seismically active, specifically this fault line, having about 17 quakes a year. And so far, again, we can't say enough, no reports of damage or injuries.
Yes, that is definitely the best news, but it was certainly felt by people far away, Ross. We keep mentioning Orange County, downtown LA, even Bakersfield, and that was a strong jolt that people are reporting that they felt. Again, that jolt shaking for a couple of seconds. We spoke with David Goldstein, who lives in Malibu, who retired from our station not so long ago, and he certainly said that it was one of the stronger earthquakes that he has felt living out there. I think he said for maybe 20 years.
Yeah, he's been in that house for 20 years. And you know, it's interesting, isn't it? We live in different parts of the county, the largest county in the country. We all experience it so differently, but it is when you're in the same place for a long time, like David is in his home, and suddenly you feel something, that's concerning.
Absolutely,
Right?
absolutely. Because, you know, once you start feeling that shake, you just don't know, is this the beginning or the end? And fortunately for us this time around, it was really the beginning and the end, a very quick jolt, 4.6 magnitude, and fortunately not causing any damage or injuries at this point.
You know, we have touched base with LAFD. They are in their earthquake mode. That means that all their firefighters at all 106 stations are going through the whole nearly 500 square miles of greater LA to make sure there's no significant damage anywhere. And listen, if by now they haven't found anything, there is nothing so far. It's been quite a while since we had news of this quake, and it looks like things are calm and we're in great shape.
We certainly are, which is the best news of all. We do know that on this day, 53 years ago, there was the San Fernando earthquake, which was a 6.6. A lot of people referred to it as the Silmar earthquake, but that earthquake, being a 6.6, killed 64 people and caused more than $500 million worth of damage. Now, things have certainly changed. We have changed the way we build structures, and a lot of our buildings have been retrofitted to withstand an earthquake. And certainly, we are happy to hear that today there's been no damage or injuries compared to that one that happened back in 1971.
Marina Jurek has been following all of this for us from the Next Weather Center here at our broadcast headquarters. Marina, what are you seeing now?
So I know that it can be a little confusing here now that the dots are changing colors, and I just want to reiterate, once it moves into yellow, that means it's just happened over an hour ago. So the red means it happens last hour, then the yellow, we've just shifted into that over 60 minutes, and that's why it says last 12 hours. So that is the color differentiation there, just to get that out to you. But I have been looking at the USGS in Southern California quake site, and all of the earthquakes since that initial 4.6 at 1:47 have been significantly smaller. We've got 3.0, 2.7, 2.1. We've had 1.9, 1.8, and so I'm following it incrementally, and that's what each of those little dots represent, is the aftershocks that happened afterwards, and none of them have been over 2.1. So that has been the strongest magnitude since we had that initial 4.6. And this is very normal, and like the USGS said, it's a very active location here on the Malibu Coast fault line, and it's an east-west fault, and so as it slips and slides and moves and adjusts, we have these aftershocks as it settles into its new location, and that is what happens every single time we have a significant earthquake. 4.6 is pretty average, but even at 4.6, we're going to see the ground settle and move back into place. And so that's what we have been monitoring here on the Malibu Coast fault line for just a little bit over an hour now. And so we'll continue to monitor this. There is that 5% chance of a foreshock here as we head into the coming days, but more than likely for the rest of the afternoon, we'll continue to see these aftershocks that are smaller than the initial magnitude.
You know, Marina, as we keep getting these aftershocks coming in the immediate future, in the next hour or two, any more chance of rain, or are we pretty much through that?
Oh, we are good. Thank goodness for that. So we saw the bulk of the rain. We had some more energy left over in our atmosphere today. So we did see a few light scattered showers out there, but that is all past now, and high pressure is basically hugging the coastline. And so because it's getting closer to our coastline, it's taking over, and that ridge will take over. It will allow for us not only to warm up, but we're going to get an offshore flow. So it'll be a little gustier as we head into the upcoming weekend, but sunny and dry. And after the record rainfall that we saw this week, we need this time for the supersaturated soils to dry up, for us to get a little bit of a breather, because we're already tracking another storm system that looks to be rearing our way as we head into President's Day weekend. So that is still another week away. But of course, we're always looking down the pipeline because we are inundated already now. We've seen as much rain as we usually see in an entire season this week. And so we're just going to have to be very cognizant of that moving forward. But for now, we're going to have a great stretch of weather for a week, which I think collectively everyone is breathing a sigh of relief as we push forward.
And what can you briefly explain for people that don't know the map there on the right, what that's showing us specifically?
My map?
The one on the right on the screen. I don't know if you can see what's going on there right now.
Okay, so those are areas where the Malibu Coast Fault, they've had that detection of energy. And so you can see the brighter blues, and that's more where the epicenter is. And then you've got the lighter blues where folks are seeing more of the effects of it or felt it. And so that is what the squares represent. They basically represent, where that distinct location was, and then how that magnitude spread over that precise area.
All right. Thank you so much, Marina. We want to check in with Elizabeth Cochran from the USGS. Thanks so much for joining us. We've been obviously talking about this 4.6 earthquake for more than an hour now, and we appreciate you taking some time to speak with us.
Sure. Happy to be here.
Elizabeth, can you tell us where we are now with the aftershocks? So the first, the initial quake hitting at about 1:47. Are you seeing them more spaced out now, or what is the situation right now?
Yeah, so we've had a total of 17 aftershocks that have occurred since the magnitude 4.6 at 1:47 earlier today. And most of those aftershocks are pretty closely clustered right near where that main shock was. And so they're distributed pretty close to the coastline there near Malibu.
You can probably hear this in your ear. We're showing video right now, Elizabeth, from Westlake. It's a dog running down the stairway. You see the little bit of the shaking. This is a home video camera. And it's interesting because we've been talking about this for quite some time, that you can tell by the video that shake was hard and fast.
Quick
right?
jolt, yeah.
Quick jolt there. What can you tell us about the length of the quake here? And that's how we experienced it, and several of our colleagues calling in, feeling the sharpness of it. We all thought perhaps bigger than 4.6, and then no real rolling feeling, it dissipating pretty quickly.
Yeah, so what you experience during an earthquake really depends on how far away you are from it. So those people who are pretty close to the epicenter, those people in Westlake Village and nearby communities, are going to feel that really sharp jolt. And then folks like me who are over in Pasadena, we did feel a little bit more of a rolling, less sharp kind of shaking. And that's just because as the waves travel across the region, they sort of spread out. They get a little lower in amplitude, and so it just feels a little less abrupt.
And Elizabeth, can you talk a little bit more about this Malibu Coast Fault line? We know that we've had some earthquakes out in the coast there, but how active has this line been?
Yeah, so this particular area has actually a pretty complex fault network. There are lots of different faults. We're going to be looking, over the next few hours, days, and sort of what the different fault traces are. Right now, based on what we know about this earthquake, this might actually be on a fault called the Anacapa Dune Fault, which is basically another fault that underlies the Malibu Coast Fault. And so we can tell which fault an earthquake is on based on both where it's located, so kind of looking at what the closest fault is to where the earthquake happened, as well as the type of split that occurred on the fault. And so in this case, rather than a sort of strike split faulting motion, that's where one side of the fault moves sideways past another that we're used to from, say, the San Andreas Fault. This is what we call a reverse fault. This is similar to what the Northridge earthquake occurred along. It's a dipping fault, so the fault sort of dips, angles into the earth, and one side of the fault moves up, and the other side kind of moves down. So, so we think it might be, one of these other small structures along that coastal region.
Can you say that fault line name again? I'm not familiar with it. It's the first time I've heard it.
Anacapa.
Anacapa?
Yeah, Anacapa, like the Anacapa Islands, yeah.
Oh, I see.
And Doom, like Point Doom.
Interesting.
I didn't realize we had the two right there so close together.
Mm-hmm. Yes. In this area, there's a pretty complex set of faults, and we really identify these faults based on often seismicity earthquakes that have happened on those faults in the past.
Is there anything that this happening on that particular fault tells you about the pressure in that area or what we may experience in the future?
So, it's difficult because we are in a complex network of faults here. Sometimes what we can say about what we might expect from what fault it's occurring on is kind of what the maximum size of the event might be on that fault. But in this case, because there's a lot of faults in the area, we've seen that larger earthquakes can jump across fault strands. And so in this case, the size of this particular fault strand doesn't really tell us a lot.
Interesting.
Yeah, very interesting to, hear all of this information. And again, you said that there had been 17 aftershocks all close to the area at this point.
That's correct, although in the few minutes we've been talking, it looks like we've had a couple more. So there's now 19 aftershocks, ranging in size up to magnitude 3. So most of them are quite small, and hopefully folks aren't feeling every single one of those.
You're more aware than anyone precisely how much water has been falling in our area over the last week. How does that factor into this situation? With a 4.6, I mean, were we really pushing the danger zone here of possible new slides, or do you feel that because we've had some sun for the last few hours at least, that that was a minor consideration?
So I think in this case, anytime you have earthquake shaking, you have a possibility of having additional landsliding. I would say this is a pretty moderate-sized quake, and so hopefully we won't see a lot of additional effects from this earthquake.
All right. Well, that's the best news. That's the best news of all. We were talking earlier about that quake in Hawaii. I believe it was a 5.7. I'm sure you were 5.7. I'm sure you were monitoring that. The video coming out of that, somewhat dramatic. What we've seen, items falling off of store shelves. But we were hearing from Caltech just a little while ago that quake happening around noon, just about an hour and 40 minutes before ours. Is that 100% completely unrelated?
Yeah, we wouldn't expect that magnitude 5.7 over in Hawaii would really affect the occurrence of earthquakes here in California.
Well, that's good news.
That is certainly good news, and this, of course, again, is the 53rd anniversary of the Sylmar earthquake, which was a 6.6, which, that long ago, we didn't have the reinforcements, and we do know that 64 people were killed in that earthquake, and it caused a lot of damage. And today, we've got a 4.6, and it's wonderful to know that we've had no damage and no reports of any injuries. And it's good to know that so much reinforcement has been done. And I also want to mention that, a lot of people were saying that they received that early warning, which, I remember you all talking about this years ago when it was coming into play, and how important it is to just have even just a couple of seconds or so to get yourself prepared.
Yeah, that's right. So we have an early warning went out for this earthquake. So for folks who have an app that gives you alerts, or potentially through Google Android, you could have received an alert. And so our system did really well for this earthquake. The initial magnitude estimate, was a 4.7 that was issued 5 seconds, just over 5 seconds after the earthquake started, effectively almost as soon as the waves hit our seismic station.
How are we doing with those warnings? Are we getting faster with that? You're obviously monitoring that from Pasadena.
Right. Yes. So yeah, essentially we can get faster warnings in a couple of ways. We get that through more seismic stations. So the additional monitoring equipment that we put out, we can then detect the waves more quickly because our stations will be closer to the event. And then we're working on, always improving the methods that we have for really quickly detecting that something's happening and estimating the location and the size of that event.
Well, I know you spent a lot of time studying these. After a smaller event like this, are there still things to be learned, things that this can tell us from, a different fault line here, the Anacapa-Doom fault line or the Malibu fault line, what this means to the larger system in the LA area?
Yeah, we can certainly look. What we'll be doing is looking at the kind of where the aftershocks are occurring. That might tell us about kind of the interaction between this fault and the various faults that we have in the area, and perhaps, illuminate in more detail kind of the structure, how the faults look exactly underground. That can, again, also tell us about how they might interact in a larger earthquake.
What about the pattern that we're seeing on the map right now of the aftershocks? Anything unusual there? Is that pretty standard? Are the aftershocks significant to your research? Does it tell us a lot about what's happening?
Yeah, so we often look at where aftershocks are occurring to understand the actual part of the fault that slipped, right? So we, from the initial main shock, we just get sort of a point location, if you will, on that fault of where the earthquake started. But oftentimes the really early aftershocks, like these ones that we're seeing in the first hour or so, they can tell us actually the whole section we can kind of map out the whole section of the fault that slipped during that magnitude 4.7, because the early aftershocks really tend to mostly occur very close to the initial main shock. You will see on the map that sometimes, earthquakes will show up that look like they're farther away. They might be, but also keep in mind that a lot of these are automated detections. And so when we go, double check them, they may move around a little bit, especially some of the smaller ones that we don't have as good a signal from. So that, and then additionally, we do expect some aftershocks to be occurring a little bit farther away. These are just other faults or other parts of the fault that may have been more significantly stressed and sort of nudged by the main shock to fail.
And Elizabeth, you were just starting to mention about the depth of the earthquake, and this one was around 8 miles, I believe, 13 kilometers, and
yes.
What that tells you and what that shows.
Yeah, so the depth of this event, it looks like it's actually been updated to 15 kilometers, so that's closer to 10 miles deep. And that tells us, it's important for the shaking that you feel, the deeper the earthquake is, the less shaking will get at the surface because those waves have had a chance to spread out. So that's a good thing in terms of the shaking for this event. And then otherwise, the depth of the earthquake as well as its aftershock actually can help us map out in 3 dimensions what that fault looks like. So yeah, this was a relatively deep event, but it's not unusually deep.
Yeah, and you're saying it's deep, but I was under the impression that this was a little more shallow because we felt it so strongly, being just a 4.6. So clearly you're the expert, and Ross and I are not, but we were thinking, oh, it must have been really shallow because we felt it so strongly.
Right. Yeah, so I think what you feel is really dependent on where you are around the earthquake, and you may have been in sort of the direction that the waves, that the fault slipped, so that would direct maybe slightly stronger shaking in your direction. But not knowing sort of exactly where you are, I can't state that for sure.
Where were you when, this is interesting to us, since you've been deployed to major quakes across the country. Where were you when this hit? Did you feel it right away? And what were your first thoughts?
Yeah, I did feel it. I was actually working in my home office, and I sort of felt moderate shaking, and I went, wait, I'm pretty sure that's an earthquake. So I immediately got on, onto our pages and looked at what information we had about the quake.
It's nice to know that you're just like us. The experts, they're just like us.
That's right.
Maybe now is a good time to briefly describe what the current thinking is when an earthquake happens. What is the very best thing to do immediately when you feel something?
So the very best thing you can do. So if you're, for example, inside, like I was, it's to check, make sure that you're not near anything that could potentially fall over, and hopefully, if you have somewhere, get under a sturdy desk or table.
What about I know we ask this all the time, and I think people are still confused about it. What about going outside? Is that, what are your thoughts on that?
Generally, we don't advise people to go outside during shaking, and that's because, in general, most of our buildings are quite well built, and most of the injuries that we've seen have occurred from either people trying to move during shaking, right? So if you're trying to run outside, you could, and the ground is moving, you increase your chance of potentially tripping and falling. Additionally, some of our buildings have facades on them, so like brick facades that can sometimes separate, and a few bricks or something could fall onto the sidewalk or the edge of the building. And if you're trying to exit a building at that time, it would be pretty dangerous if any of those components were coming down off of the building. Generally you want to, if you're in a building, you want to stay in that building. If you're outside, you want to look around and, be aware of things that could fall or could potentially be in your way if as the shaking continues, and try and move away, but don't try and go too far.
I know it's elementary, but it always bears repeating. We have come light years in terms of earthquake preparedness from the quake that hit in 1971, San Fernando, that earthquake, also called the Silmar earthquake. This is the 53rd anniversary of it today. 64 people killed, more than $500,000 in damage. Are you familiar with that quake? I know that you went to UCLA and you've spent a lot of time in this area. I'm sure you were not at UCLA in 1971. But have you studied it? And just describe for us how far we have really come since then. I mean, it's a completely different world now, isn't it?
Yeah, so after each major event, like the San Fernando earthquake or the Northridge earthquake that was about 20 years after that one, but in a similar location, We learn about, how our buildings survive or don't survive through strong shaking, and then we make changes to buildings, to roadways, and so it does mean that now buildings built today are much more likely to come through earthquake shaking with less damage and less chance of fatalities.
And I have to imagine that when we do have an earthquake like this, it really does serve as a reminder that really people need to be prepared. That, we often hear it's not if, but when a bigger earthquake is going to hit. As far as, we always think about the water and food and the fact that really we might not be able to get any services for, I believe it's 3 days.
Right.
Well, speaking of being prepared, Elizabeth, if you're near a TV, please watch this. We just got some video in from Oxnard. We've been showing these videos of animals. A lot of people have these cameras at home now, and they've been monitoring it. So we're going to show you what happened to this home pet when the quake hit at about 1:47 p.m. today. Do we have that video?
I don't think that video is ready just yet, but we did see one dog that we saw a big shake and then a dog running down a stairwell. That was in Westlake Village.
All right, I think that video is ready. Let's take a look at it. So this dog's sleeping. This just sent in to us.
Dog wakes up.
Ooh. Well, that's Elizabeth, can you see this?
I cannot. I'm trying to
get to a TV.
Yeah, it shows a dog sleeping and perks its little head up and then runs, I guess, as if to explore what is happening. And oftentimes we hear that animals sense these before we even detect that they're happening. But
well, it's interesting because there's another dog in the video that doesn't move. So I think that pretty much sums up what has happened today. But you can see the floor literally moving straight up and down in this video. That's somewhat unusual, or maybe that's the camera bobbing straight up and down. Yeah. But yeah, and we had another one earlier. With a dog running down the stairs. But, Elizabeth, I don't know if you have pets, but here we go. This one, you can see the dog panicking. And this is always a concern of all of us who own pets, is your pet's home alone and just terrified. They don't know what's happening.
But the good thing with both of these videos is that you can clearly see that there is no damage to either of these structures. We don't see anything fall. We don't really even see much of anything even swaying, which is typically what we see, and we don't see that in these videos, which, I have to say, Elizabeth, was a little surprising to me that we haven't heard of any damage. We haven't seen any video of anything shaking, falling off shelves or anything at homes or at stores. Is that because of the depth of this earthquake?
That could be due to the depth of the earthquake and just sort of where it was located relative to most of the populated areas. It was right there on the coast, and so Westlake Village was a little bit farther away. And hopefully we'll continue to see that there isn't too much damage.
This is so interesting to watch this video because it's just another reminder. You see that cabinet there against the wall, that these things have to be secured. I mean, if you're not home and something happens, your pet, it's...
Absolutely. And again, that goes to what you were talking about before we went to that video, just about how things have changed in preparing for earthquakes and how now there are kits that you can buy to bolt your furniture. There's the new retrofitting with buildings. And certainly a lot of changes that have happened over the years. And as you were mentioning, Elizabeth, every time there is a major earthquake, there are new improvements.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. So we learn more about the science of the earthquakes with every one that happens, and we also learn how to prepare our structures to deal with that shaking.
Let's talk about the trends that you're seeing in your studies in Pasadena. Here in Southern California, are we seeing a steady amount of earthquakes year to year? Is it increasing year over year, decreasing? Are there trends that you're spotting? What are you seeing?
Yeah, so in general, earthquakes, they don't behave very regularly.
Well, of course.
So
Yeah.
they, will have a cluster event, and then we'll have over a period of a few years, and then we'll have fewer events. If you went and looked at our earthquake catalogs or our listing of how many earthquakes there are every year, and you didn't pay attention to, the magnitudes we're listing, you would think that there's more and more earthquakes happening. But instead, we've just gotten much better at detecting the small ones. And so, back at the time of the Fillmore quake, we really could only detect earthquakes down to maybe around magnitude 2. And now we can detect events regularly that are magnitude 1 or even less than that. And so we have a lot more earthquakes for us to use to study, what these faults look like and identify all these different fault strands. So just, we were talking about earlier with the fault zones, this area, we are able to identify those faults most of the time based on the earthquakes that have occurred on them.
So is the current thinking now that this is almost constant and the pressure is much more self-regulating than we ever thought it was?
I wouldn't, unfortunately, go that far. There are earthquakes happening all the time, but the small events really don't release enough energy to prevent the large earthquakes from happening. So unfortunately, we're stuck with the hazard of having larger earthquakes on some of our major faults, like the San Andreas Fault.
Because we do hear the reports of, it's been a while. It's been a while since a big one. It's been too long, and we're overdue. Is there any real science or validity to that then?
Yeah, so there's actually a whole field of study called paleoseismology. So this is where geologists can go and basically dig across faults, identify earthquakes that have happened over the last hundreds or thousands of years, and also with that they get this timeline of earthquakes on, say, the San Andreas Fault going back several thousand years, and then from that they can look at, well, how often are earthquakes occurring, San Andreas large earthquakes, so they can only really see the evidence for the magnitude 7 to 8 earthquakes. And they can get a timeline and sort of determine, oh, okay, well, there's, on average, there's a magnitude 7+ event on the San Andreas every, 100 years in this particular area. So, we are able to kind of look back into the past where we may not have, written records or records of earthquakes from humans, right? But the rocks kind of preserve information about what earthquakes have happened in the past.
And for folks that are just joining us, we want to recap here that a 4.6 magnitude earthquake struck at 1:47 this afternoon near Malibu. It was about 10 miles beneath the surface. There have been probably about 20 aftershocks that have happened since then, perhaps even more. We are joined by Elizabeth Cochran from the USGS, and I know that you had been keeping tabs on some of those aftershocks, Elizabeth, with the largest one being 3.0.
That's correct, yes.
And have we had even more at this point? I think at last check you had told us a 19 aftershocks.
Yeah, so now we are up to 21.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, so the last two were magnitude 1.6 and a magnitude 2. Potentially, folks can feel the magnitude 2 events, but we'd expect more, more widely felt earthquakes will be at least magnitude 3.
I see. You know, most Californians know that the San Andreas Fault Line is one of the largest in the world, right? Running about 800 miles from the Salton Sea to Cape Mendocino. It cuts the state essentially in two. You know, it's interesting. We talked about the history of what we've seen here and what we can predict going forward. Is the feeling right now that you know, I think the biggest one we had was Ferndale in December 22 was a 6.4. That's is that the largest one we've had recently?
That sounds correct. Yeah.
Yeah, and then we had Antelope Valley in 2021, which is a 6.0. So it's been quite a while since we've really had anything, you know, over 6.5. I'm trying to look back here.
So there was the Ridgecrest earthquake in 2019, which was a magnitude 7.1.
Yeah.
Centered in the Mojave.
Right. So, you know, all in all, I mean, knock on something,
Yes.
saying we have been today. We got very fortunate today. I mean, how does that?
And you hate to say that we dodged a bullet,
I hate to say that, but
you
we
know,
did.
We
really,
did.
essentially.
Absolutely, we did. All right, we are concluding our coverage of this breaking news: a 4.6 earthquake striking at 1:47 here on KCAL News. But you can continue to get updates, and we will continue to stay on this on our stream, kcalnews.com. And of course, we will have much more on KCAL 9 News at 4 o'clock.
That's coming up in just 30 minutes. All right, if you're just joining us here on kcalnews.com or cbsla.com, we have had a magnitude 4.6 quake centered around Malibu happening at 1:47 this afternoon. The depth right now, I think it's been updated nearly 10 miles, but officially I think we have 9 miles below right now. We had immediate reports of a sudden sharp jolt happening. And we all thought, actually, the magnitude may be higher. That may be because here in Studio City, we're relatively close to Malibu compared to outlying areas where they did feel, in Pasadena, for example, some rolling effects. But no reports of injuries, no reports of major damages. We do have some video sent in from viewers just a little while ago. One of them showing a puppy here at home. You can hear the shaking. Mostly the camera shaking there as well. The dog rolling and running down the stairs. No damage there though. The dog thankfully okay. And we have another piece of video that has been sent in here. This one in Oxnard. 2 dogs there, and this is interesting. This one right here. See the floor shaking? You see him run, but then there's another little puppy whose sleep was not even disturbed. Let's go over to our meteorologist, Marina Jurica, who's been monitoring the aftershocks from the Next Weather Center. Marina, what have you been seeing?
Ross, so yeah, over 20 aftershocks, which you can see on that earthquake graphic. If you were wondering what, we're looking at the video right now, but if we could pop up that there, perfect. The initial earthquake was at 1:47 p.m. at 4.6 magnitude right there, just 6 miles north of Malibu. And all of those yellow dots represent basically the last, I'd say, 90 minutes over time. Yeah. And the red dots are the aftershocks that have happened in the last hour. And so I believe we were talking to the USGS and it was over 21 already. And that's very normal. And as I have been saying for the last hour, once we have an earthquake of this magnitude, even though it's pretty average by all standards here on the fault line, the earth needs to settle, the fault needs to settle. And so as you see that initial movement, once it settles back into its new location, to its new orientation, it allows for a lot of these aftershocks to occur. occur afterwards. It could be anywhere from a couple hours afterwards to, 24 hours, which is usually the longest. And there is that 5% chance, of course, that you can see a foreshock, which is over the next couple of days a stronger earthquake, but a 5% chance is very low. It is guaranteed that we see these aftershocks for a few hours after the initial 4.6 magnitude earthquake, which we'll see for the rest of the day today. But Malibu area, as we mentioned, just 6 miles north of the heart of Malibu, and it occurred, about an hour and a half ago.
All right, joining us on the phone right now, thank you, Marina, is Elizabeth Cochran from the USGS based in Pasadena. Elizabeth, you've been monitoring this aftershock situation as well. What magnitudes have you been seeing with those?
Yeah, for all the aftershocks that we've seen, we have the largest aftershock was a magnitude 3, which happened about actually 3 minutes after the main shock. The rest of the aftershocks have been in the sort of low magnitude 2 to magnitude 1.5 range. So hopefully most of the folks out there aren't feeling each and every one of those.
No, in fact, I felt the initial jolt. I haven't felt a single aftershock. That's a good thing. This is apparently the fourth 4-point something that we've had in recent weeks. Now, we heard from Caltech, I believe, that historically it's not uncommon to have multiple 4s in a short period of time. But she did say we've been in a quiet period recently, though. Now, given that we've again had several 4-point something quakes in the last few weeks, are we entering, do you believe, a period of increased seismic activity?
I think we can't say anything from these events that we've seen over the last few weeks. Magnitude 4 to 4.5 events are relatively common, and so earthquakes tend to sort of occur at random. And at this point, there's nothing to indicate that we're really seeing a shift in earthquake rates overall.
We've been learning throughout the afternoon that along the Malibu fault line, we get about 17 earthquakes, I think above 4.0 in a year. You say that the current thinking is that this is the Anacapa-Doom fault line, which is part of that system there. What do you typically see along that fault line in a year?
So I guess I don't know the exact statistics for how many events happen along that fault line. It'll be sort of similar. We kind of consider these faults as sort of a zone of faults. And so for every event that happens, especially if they're smaller events, it'll be quite difficult to identify which of the different fault strands the event actually is happening on.
Right. We have been talking about the oddity that we hear are live back on the air when today is, in fact, the 53rd anniversary of the 1971 San Fernando earthquake. That was recorded as a 6.6. Many people think of that as the Sylmar earthquake. Back then, that killed 64 people and caused more than $500 million in damages. And Elizabeth, it's because of horrible disasters like that we are so much more prepared more than 50 years later, right?
That's right. So with every event that we have, we learn a little more about both the earthquakes as well as how our buildings and our road networks and our bridges perform during strong shaking. And so with that, we can both improve, retrofit buildings that have already been built, and also make sure that newer buildings are built to higher standards and are able to better withstand strong shaking.
In this early warning system we have, or I should say the alert system that we have, right, that goes out over cell phones, that is obviously relatively new, but now that system is in place, even that system is constantly updated and becoming quicker and quicker. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the Earthquake Early Warning System, or Shake Alert, has been, I think we've had public alerts in California since 2019. But we're continuing to update and improve that system. And the ways that we improve that system are by including or adding additional seismic sensors around the state. So here in Los Angeles, we actually have a good set of a good coverage of our seismic network, so that we can quickly detect and determine how big the magnitude is for events like the one we saw today. The other thing we do is, all that data has to be analyzed extremely quickly and hopefully also reliably, so that we can get the location and magnitude within a couple of seconds of the earthquake starting. So we're always working on kind of refining how we're doing the analysis, automated analysis of that data coming in.
Do we have the most advanced, quickest alert system in the world right now?
I'm not sure I would put us in as the fastest system. So there are early warning systems in a number of countries. Both Japan and Mexico have had early warning systems for at least a decade. And so I think we all try and work to detect the events as quickly as we can, using actually fairly similar methods.
Where does the funding come from for that, and how do we get even better? What is it that we need to be even better at this? I mean, today, even though there was no damage and no injuries, it really serves as a reminder of where we live in beautiful Southern California, but what the costs are and what the potential dangers are here in our area. How can we make it better?
Yeah, so as I said, the system is sort of always being improved, and so there is funding being provided at sort of the state and the federal level for continuing those improvements of the earthquake early warning system. And I'll note that the early warning system is public in California, Oregon, and Washington currently.
Hey, on a more basic level, where were you when, for people that are just joining us, where were you when this happened? And I mean, this is your job. You live this every day. What were your first thoughts?
Yeah, so I was working at home, and I felt the ground sort of mildly move back and forth here in Pasadena. I immediately went, oh, I think that was an earthquake. My cat was nearby. I don't think he did anything. So unlike the nice dog videos he's been showing, he was happily sleeping away. So I immediately started looking at our web pages, which everyone can access to figure out how big the earthquake was and where it was located. I knew it was. You get kind of good at estimating how big these things are and how far away they are. So I knew it wasn't probably very big, and I also knew it wasn't directly underneath where I was.
Well, I know you have to go in just more than a minute, but really quickly, if you can tell me, because you do study this, what is your big takeaway from this, and what will you be looking at with the data tomorrow?
Yeah, so I think what we'll be looking at is we'll be continuing to look at kind of what the aftershock rates are for this, where the aftershocks are occurring, and sort of monitoring what's happening with the sequence as it unfolds. As was mentioned earlier, we expect the aftershocks to continue for the next several days at least, and so people should be aware that they could certainly feel another event. I will give you a little statistic here. In general, for any earthquake that we have, the largest aftershock that earthquake tends to be 1 magnitude unit lower. So, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a magnitude sort of 3.5-ish earthquake that people might feel over the next few days. But that's just average statistics. not a
Oh.
prediction.
All right, it is exactly 3:40, as long as you said you could stay. Elizabeth Cochran, thank you so much for joining us and all your insights. I'm sure we'll be talking to you, hopefully, a long way in the future.
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you. If you're just joining us, we experienced a 4.6 earthquake centered in the Malibu area, happening at about 1:47 this afternoon. The shock was actually felt over a wide area as far east as Palm Springs, and you see here on the map all the aftershocks that we've experienced, more than 21 at this point in our area. But we've been in touch with authorities, and we have zero reports of any injuries, of any damage. Sky Cal just a few minutes ago was flying over Mulholland Drive, where we've seen some mudslides from all the rain that we've had over the past few days, and we were curious if this shake, although not severe, was going to inspire more damage. And so far, we have not seen anything like that, fortunately. Joining us right now is our meteorologist, Marina Jurica. As we look at this video, again, Marina, the dogs waking up to this relatively minor quake today. What's the latest that you're seeing on your maps there?
So yes, I've been looking and monitoring, and like you said, over 20, and as the USGS reported as well, 3.0 was the largest largest aftershock that we saw after the initial 4.6 at 1:47 p.m. And the graphic that we're looking at right now basically denotes all of those aftershocks. So you can see that it is very normal to see this many aftershocks, and anything in yellow is what we've seen really over like the last hour or two, and then the reds are within the last hour. So those are definitely showing less frequency than when we originally saw the shake, and then you see a lot more within like the first 10 to 20 minutes as that ground settles. So once you have that initial earthquake, the fault takes its time to readjust to exactly the location that it needs to be in. And so as it readjusts into that location, you see minor movements, not quite as jarring as the first. And so that is why we have these aftershocks in succession afterwards. And so we will continue to see that at least, I would say, through the rest of the day today. But as she mentioned, it's so hard because most of them, you know, are 1 to 2 magnitudes, and those are really hard to feel. And so it's really, I'm sure a couple of those 3.1s that happened directly after only a few minutes, the initial 4.6, some people could feel that we're closer to this location, which is just about 6 miles up the one from Malibu, which is where the epicenter was. And so that's what we've been following, is just seeing that. And of course, she did mention that we will be looking at the potential at 5%, which is so small, for the chance of that foreshock, which is basically a stronger earthquake happening in the coming hours or coming days. But it is such a small chance, but we should always, you know, be cognizant of that chance and ready to go. But we average about 17 of these quakes in an average year right here along that Malibu coast fault. And there's a lot of fault lines that move east to west in this general area. And so I know they're going to do a lot more research now to pinpoint the exact fault line that that did occur on. But there is a lot of them that are really centered in that area. But 4.6 earthquake near Malibu that happened at about 1:47. So we're coming up here on almost 2 hours since we felt it. But like she said, it happens a lot in this area. And there was, you know, nothing special about this particular one. It's pretty average at 4.6, but a lot of people felt it. And we have that more slip-slide fault line across the coastline, and that can be just a lot more jarring than that rolling effect that we usually get when we see more of the underneath. But because this was a slip-slide fault, it's more jolting, and I think that's what shocked a lot of people. Is just they felt it, even though it wasn't, you know, something that was groundbreaking. They did feel it, well, groundbreaking literally, yes, but they didn't feel it as much. And so these minor shifts in this fault line are pretty common. And like we talked about before, Ross, it's good to get a little bit of this energy released gradually than in one lump sum, because then that's what makes for the larger earthquakes.
Well, you know, Marina, as you and our entire team has been dutifully covering all of this rain coming down, what a relief that 2 hours after this happened, that we haven't seen any more mudsliding, any significant earth moving, any home problems so far. That's a good thing.
Yes, for sure it is, because once the ground moves, once there's already that initial mudslide from the atmospheric river event that we had, it probably wouldn't take long for us to see the effects of that happening, you know, maybe 5 to 10 minutes after the earthquake. So I'm really happy that we've had a couple of days here to regroup, and that supersaturated ground has had time to recuperate, and we have a nice long stretch, Ross, here of at least a week where we're going to be seeing dry weather. The next storm system that we're looking at down the pipe won't be in until President's Day weekend. So we're looking at next Friday into the weekend where we could be tapping into the atmospheric river again. But for now, we've got this nice stretch after record-breaking rainfall. I mean, we saw an amount of rainfall in an entire season in 2 systems. And so I'm really happy Wednesday night we only picked up on a quarter of a half an inch of rain as well. Yes, we need it, but we don't need it so fast and in such a quick period of time, if you know what I mean.
Oh, we all know what you mean right now. All right, Marina, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Stand by. We'll come right back to you if anything changes. LAFD, of course, is in earthquake mode still. After this happened, you know, what they do is they go out, all personnel, it's all hands on deck. Firefighters from all 106 stations are doing a complete survey of greater Los Angeles. That's 470 square miles, and so far, the good news is not a thing to report. Not so fortunate over in Hawaii. Just after noon today, Hawaii experienced a 5.7 magnitude quake, and we've seen some video out of Hawaii where it was the rattling off of store shelves. That kind of video that we've seen here all too many times. Fortunately, no major damage that we're aware of yet there. So is there any possibility that that ring of fire system is connected or has an impact with a 5.7 quake here along our Malibu fault line, or more specifically the Anacapa Doom fault line where this exactly was? Well, Caltech's Lucille Jones spoke with us about that just a little while ago.
There would be no relation. I mean, earthquakes, magnitude 5s happen every day somewhere around the world. And we have looked for correlations between earthquakes at greater distances. It scales, and we do see it, but it scales with the size of the first earthquake. And a magnitude 5.7 might affect as much as 100 miles or so. And California is way more than 100 miles away from Hawaii. It's widely felt across the Los Angeles area. I felt it here in Pasadena. And it's, again, a fault that's, it's an area that has had plenty of earthquakes in the past and is well understood to be a seismically active area. It's not so large that we would really be expecting any damage. So it's sort of run-of-the-mill for earthquake country. We have had about a dozen aftershocks already, and that would be expected to continue over the day at least.
It's so interesting listening to Lucy there talking about this being run-of-the-mill. And listen, that's the good thing. We're staying on the stream here with you just in case the small possibility, the 5% chance that we get a bigger aftershock, but that's only 5% possibility, very unlikely. So far, we've seen much, much smaller aftershocks. As you take a live look, I believe, of Malibu right now, where that quake was centered near. We had our David Goldstein, our former investigative reporter who just recently retired, has a home there in lovely Malibu. And he says after living there for 20 years. It's the first time he's had just a moment of pause, feeling that in his home as a sharp jolt. That's what we experienced here in Studio City, a very quick, sharp jolt. Most of our reports coming from Malibu, Thousand Oaks, and our area, because of course we are the closest. But we did speak with the USGS in Pasadena, where they said that they felt more of the slight roll because of course they are farther away from the quake where it happened there in Malibu. As you look at the map here, you see our 20 plus aftershocks happening right there in the area. It's really a fortunate day so far that we haven't had any more significant problems. Let's go to some of the video that we've actually been bringing in. Our viewers have been contacting us with fortunately minor experiences like this one right here in Westlake. You can see the ground, but more importantly, probably exaggerated by the camera there shaking, and that little cute puppy running down the stairs, terrified, but fortunately not hurt at all. Something to think about. Most of us have to leave our pets at home, of course. Let's go over to Oxnard right now. And this is really interesting here because you'll see when the quake happens, just before 2, this doggy right here woken up a little scared. You can actually see the ground moving up and down, or that could be exaggerated by the effect of the camera. And then the puppy there on the right portion of your screen, not even phased. Not even phased at all. So in this area where the Malibu fault line is, it's interesting to note that the largest quake that we've had in a 10-mile area surrounding this fault line was all the way back in 1973, and that was only, relatively speaking, only a 5.3, which is pretty good. And of course, we had relatively pretty good, I say. We had the Ojai quake, which was a 5.1. You remember that during the storm. We were calling it a hurricane briefly, and that rattled all sorts of things in shops there, breaking bottles and glass and some windows, but no critical damage there in the area. Let's go back to our Marina Jurica and the Next Weather Center to get an update on what information is coming in here to the studio. Marina, what are you seeing? Marina, can you hear me? All right, I think we're still coordinating here and switching out some mics as we get ready for KCAL News at 4 coming up in just a few minutes. You know, interestingly and tragically, today, Friday, is the 53rd anniversary of the 1971 San Fernando quake. That was a 6.6, very serious, with severe damage. Many people calling that the Sylmar quake. That killing 64 people and causing $500 million worth of damages. That, of course, was about more than 50 years ago, and our technology has changed so extensively since then across the Southland. Now we have one, not the most advanced, but one of the most advanced alert systems in the world, and the alerts here going out just within seconds of this happening at the epicenter there. Before we leave you here in the stream and we start KCAL News at 4, let's try to check in one more time with our weather center. Really quickly, Marina, anything new on the aftershocks? Okay. We don't have that available to us, but we are going to be starting KCAL News at 4 p.m., both on the stream and on KCAL News Channel 9 in just a few moments, and we'll have complete coverage over our entire area from this earthquake hitting at 1:47. No injury, no damages. Our coverage continues in just a few minutes.
Hair shedding,
Breaking news at 4. Southern California shaken up this afternoon. A 4.6 magnitude earthquake hit just before 2 p.m.
Yeah, it was centered between Malibu and Thousand Oaks, about 8 miles northwest of Malibu. It was followed by at least 20 aftershocks, and at least 2 of them were 3.0. And people have been reporting feeling the shaking as far as the southern Inland Empire.
KCAL reporter Lustelia Caballero is live for us in Malibu with more. Lustelia, what can you tell us?
Well, folks are still visibly shaken up here in Malibu. One woman told us that this was the first time she's actually ever experienced something like this after moving here from out of state. She describes this as a terrifying experience, not knowing if things were going to fall on top of her head from shelves. And of course, we aren't the only ones who felt it. Our furry friends did as well. If you take a look at this video, you'll notice some pups napping when all of a sudden, clearly you can see the moment where they start feeling uncomfortable. They wake up, they really don't know what's going on, but I'm sure they know it doesn't feel good. And so they get up. One of them actually bolts out. And this is something that many folks here were feeling as well. And not surprisingly, some even running out of their homes or even the businesses they were in because they were just so rattled. And here's another video of some pups running down the stairs because they felt uncomfortable, certainly feeling this earthquake. And this is just a testament to just how powerful the impact of this earthquake was. We are currently here in Malibu at Colony House Liquor Store. I'm going to call Leonard over. Leonard, talk to me about what you felt the moment that 4.6 magnitude quake hit.
I felt, of course, a lot of shaking. I'm a local. I grew up out here, and this one felt the strongest probably in my life that I've felt before. The bottles were swaying back and forth. We only had a handful of bottles actually tip over and fall. The structure itself made some weird kind of noises, you know, because it did shake.
And you mentioned this building was old. What was the top concern for you as literally everything seemed to be shaking around you?
Well, these guys are kind of laughing at me. I went running because I was way in the back by the cooler there.
Yeah, you want to show us?
Yeah. Basically, I was back here, and
right.
You'll see me on a video if it's played at all. Sorry about that little narrow here. And when I was over here and the bottle started shaking, you can clearly see it on our video camera. Mm-hmm. And basically, clearly, I went running out.
Yeah.
I just, in the back of my mind, I didn't want to be stuck in an old building, and who knows if it was going to get worse or not.
And we did take a look at that video, and it really seemed like some of those bottles were shaking pretty
violently. And I just, you know, you don't know initially how bad it's going to get, to reiterate that again. And so I thought it's just best to be outside in the open, you know. But it was, for me, it was a little bit startling. I'll definitely have to say it shook me a little bit. No pun intended there. It just was really strong, it felt like. Stronger than 4.6 in my opinion, but yeah.
And you mentioned you're a local, so you're used to the quakes, but nothing quite like this.
I remember Northridge, and I remember when I was a child, I forget which one that was, where I was in bed and it actually rolled me around. This one felt as strong, yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Leonard.
Course.
We
Thank
are
you
so
very
happy
much.
you are okay.
Thank you.
And keep it here on KCAL News. Coming up at 5, we will show you that video where you can see Leonard running through the store. Certainly some terrifying moments for many folks, including those who work right here. Reporting live in Malibu, Lustelia Caballero, KCAL News.
All right, Lustelia, thank you. And for more on the 4.6 earthquake that rattled the Southland, here's meteorologist Olga Ospina. Olga.
Hi, Amy and Serene. I mean, what a shaker today. And, you know, one of the big things is it was in such a populated area. A lot of times we get these earthquakes where we really don't have that many people around, but a lot of people certainly felt it. And want to show you the latest details on this earthquake in Malibu. So again, magnitude is 4.6, the time 1:47 in the afternoon, and the depth right around 9 miles. So the deeper it is, yes, the less you're going to feel it, but still just 9 miles depth. And want to give you a bigger show you the bigger area. So this is going to be near Thousand Oaks, places like Camarillo, out through Ventura County, moving into LA County for places like Calabasas, Simi Valley, Santa Monica, right along the coastline as well. And here's a few details on this. So again, this happened on the Malibu coast fault. California typically averages just about 17 earthquakes that are magnitude at least 4 and above, so not that many. And that one happened today. Of course, we certainly felt it. As with any quake, a 5% chance it's a foreshock, so that is the good news. There is really a minimal chance that the bigger one is to come. But we'll continue looking at all the details of this quake in Malibu, of course, throughout the day, and also take a look at your forecast, which is looking really nice for the weekend. So I'll have that for you coming up in just a few minutes. Back to you, ladies.
All right, Olga, thank you. And of course, we will continue to track the latest on the quake and aftershocks on KCAL News and KCALnews.com.
An earthquake also hit Hawaii's Big Island, measuring at a 5.7 magnitude. There are reports that things were knocked off shelves in nearby towns, but there are no reports of any serious damage. Shaking was felt in Honolulu on Oahu, about 200 miles to the north. Geological survey reports show the quake happened just after 10 this morning and was about 6 miles deep.
Well, Lakers fans are looking to Crypto.com Arena to see the new Kobe Bryant statue.
Yeah, the tribute is in Star Plaza along with the statues of other Lakers legends. The statue was unveiled for the first time Thursday at a ceremony attended by Kobe's widow, Vanessa, and former teammates. It stands at 19 feet tall, showing Kobe with his finger pointing to the sky. Fans waited in line all morning with